So I want to welcome everyone from the Environmental Humanities course that's being run by UNSW on Remaking Nature. We've got a number of distinguished storytellers on the line. We've got Stephen joining us from UNSW Australia, the Morven Brown building. We have Susie joining us from the Earlwood Farm, the place where we shot the story about Deanna Pendel's Needs Reseeds and talked about creating multi-species communities. And then we have Greg on the line here. We're broadcasting from the Princeton Environment Institute, and Greg is taking a course with me in environmental art. My name is Eben Kirksey, and what we're going to do today is both play the game, but before that, just talk a little bit about what the point of all this really is. So again, the Game of Global Futures was designed by Anna Tsing and Elizabeth Pollman. It's a way of thinking about how unexpected connections can make new things come into being. So the older ways that we had of talking about history involved narratives of progress, how modernity resulted in these predictable changes, things like development. But this game is about thinking about how contingency sometimes produces futures that we haven't even dreamed of before. So we have lots of stories about how technology is this driving force that is changing society. We have other stories that stick with us about how human nature might reestablish itself, despite any changes that modernity or technology brings about to reestablish historic gender roles or racial hierarchies. But we're trying to get past those older stories to think about the contingencies that are forged and how contingencies forge these unexpected connections that bring new futures into being. So the key word of this game is again coalescence. This is a historical force that just derives from these unexpected connections. So a connection that involves a coalescence transforms all the parties involved. And as you see from the missions and from some of the cards that were dealt when telling this story, all the parties aren't necessarily humans. There's other kinds of critters involved. There's massive forces like climate change involved. So in telling these games about the future, in part we're trying to get you to rethink the past. How is it that something like Thai cuisine came about? It's not that anyone sat down and planned Thai cuisine, but it had to do with these unexpected connections and contingencies, basically Portuguese traders bringing in these hot chili peppers that really transformed a culture. So we're trying to narrate these transformations, to think about surprising possibilities even in the face of odds that might seem impossible. We're trying to push the bounds of realism and realistic possibility. So you can play this game online. We've got this interactive form set up for you with the Future Learn website, but you can also print this game out and play it at home with friends or family, other students. So what we're going to do is just tell a series of stories. So I've got one queued up. Stephen's going to tell us a story, and Greg's going to also tell us a story. So a number of you have already told stories in response to the main mission that we've posted on Future Learn, and that mission is to bring together urban and rural schemes to save or destroy civilization as we know it. So these are potentially big stories, and some of them have already been posted on the Facebook page. It sort of reveals which one of those options you go for, whether you have sort of an apocalyptic imagination or if maybe you're more hopeful in the face of ongoing environmental problems in the world. The mission that I'm picking is the same one that I did in the trailer video that I didn't tell the story for, but that you got to hear about. That's forced the scattering of a group, human or otherwise, that currently has health and autonomy in its own territory. So the images that I chose were sort of DNA, the Holy Bible. Yeah, it looks okay. And then a frog in the rainforest. So the story I'm going to narrate involves a company called Aqua Bounty that has been raising these transgenic salmon in Panama. They couldn't get permission to raise these salmon in the U.S., so they took their products south of the border. And a disease inadvertently emerged from this commercial enterprise, a disease that impacts amphibian communities. So all these frogs started to go extinct. People learned of these extinctions and got inspired by Messianic Christianity to found this organization called the Amphibian Ark. And they built a very little ark, this assemblage of transnational infrastructure involving aquariums, cryogenic banks, and zoological facilities where these animals can be stored. It wasn't going so well. The Amphibian Ark was founded in the year 2008. It was a year that coincided with global financial cataclysm. But then some good Christian evangelists got in touch with the Koch brothers, a billionaire family here in the United States. And the Koch brothers decided that they were going to endow this Amphibian Ark and give $50 million, which was enough to keep this ark alive forever. So the story is about forcing a scattering of the group, but I sort of try to give a hopeful spin and a happier ending involving this strange alliance between conservationists and the billionaire class. So Greg's up next, and his mission is to save an endangered animal that is threatened by local inhabitants, revitalize the local economy, create a new system for sustaining the animal and the local economy. And the pictures I'm going to give him are Mickey Mouse, Gandhi, or some, like all these cards are subject to interpretation, right? Like you could read this as like an old bald guy, and could be any old bald guy, but I think, perhaps it's Gandhi. And here's a bomb.
Cool. So my story is going to center upon the economy of the Maluku Islands, who in this postmodern landscape, they've become very independent hunting whales. So they hunt fin whales, and because of that, they've been able to be pretty self-sustaining, but these fin whales are endangered, as you said. Western nations noticed this, and instead of utilizing their technological superiority through warfare, they moderned their efforts through a more peaceful style, just like in Gandhi. And they think that the best way to extend their influence throughout the globe is to economically control these islands in strategic ports. And so what they do, they go into the Maluku Islands, they buy up a bunch of land, and they basically create a theme park, an entire theme park centered on the fin whale, turning it into an object of economic exploitation, into a beloved character in the Maluku Islands. They pump money into this theme park, it grows hugely successful. Fin whales are protected, they're loved. However, the Maluku Islands are very economically dependent on these Western nations. However, the fin whales are saved as a species. So that's what happens.
So next I'll invite Stephen Muki into the conversation. So the mission I'm giving you, Stephen, is to enable a marginalized group to gain power in a particular geographical location, not necessarily its own, in the midst of international conflict. And the cards I'm going to give you are an Inuit, Fidel Castro, and baseball. And we've been sort of playing fast and loose with the rules. Like I use 3 images, but the actual rules is that you're supposed to choose 2 and discard 1. So you can really do whatever you want with this game.
Okay, thanks, Eben. I'm choosing 2 images for that mission. My story is set in the future. It's a climate change story. The Arctic ice cap is retreating rapidly, and the Inuit are in trouble. They're in trouble because they're losing their environment, but also because international mining companies are flooding into their region looking for oil, various forms of dirty energy. But the Inuit have predicted this problem, and they're one step ahead, and they've been mining a very rare element called unobtainium, and they're selling it now on the open market and making a lot of money. But their mission is to gain power, and you don't just gain power through money, through being part of the whole industrial game. You also have to win the hearts and minds of the people, and so they invest their money in World Series baseball, which of course they can't use Florida anymore for spring training because it's too hot down there. So they have spring training up in Nunavut territory, and the Inuit organize everything. They've got their own baseball team because they've spent money buying the best players, and the Seals, their own team, win the pennant for that season. They win the World Series. Everybody thinks the Inuit are not only fantastic guys, but are also investing their money in nice, healthy things like sport. And so that's how the Inuit have overcome their problem.
Sounds great. and I think a lot of these stories are about sort of imagining possibilities amidst these forces that might be beyond our control. You know, there's been a lot of advocacy and political organizing around controlling climate change, but it might be a future that we can't avoid. And it's about sort of exploring these possibilities that emerge amidst these big historical processes. So Susie, I want to bring you into the conversation. I know that a lot of interesting comments and stories have emerged on the Future Learn site. So I was wondering if you could just share some of those stories and comments with us.
Sure. So yeah, I've been enjoying reading over the past week as there's been emerging. And as Eben mentioned before, there is this kind of really interesting twist where the people decide to go the live in harmony approach towards the end, or a more apocalyptic version. Like there was a great story about humans being harvested for their fat by robots right at the end. So lots of really fun stuff, and really interesting to see how some of you have taken on the personification approach or take the tree active of the tree. And things like that. So yeah, lots of fun, and some of those stories have now been posted onto Facebook, and so people can view them there as well. And shall I ask you some of the questions that have come up, Eben?
Yeah, for sure. That'd be great.
Cool. So one, apologies if I'm saying your name wrong. Perhaps someone could explain to me exactly how playing this game is supposed to have any effect upon the evolutionary dead end that our species is being led into by the 1%ers who own most of everything.
So my story, in part, was maybe a preemptive response to that question. So, you know, we're at a moment in history where power is radically asymmetrical, where right now in this country we're at a moment where there's a lot of debate about whether people like the Koch brothers can influence electoral outcomes. And I think this game is about sort of stepping back from how power predictably functions. So you know, we might see power functioning predictably in the world all around us, but I don't think the future is foreclosed to you know, how things are usually operating. And I think one way of opening up the future to lively possibilities is scaling up our imagination and you know, trying to tell and imagine plausible stories about the future that disrupt that predictable functioning of power. So in telling stories that push the bounds of realism and realistic possibility, you know, I really think we can rework, we can remake the world. So there's a classic book by Robin Kelley called Freedom Dreams, and it's a book about the black imagination here in the contemporary U.S. And he sort of inventories a lot of utopian visions held by African Americans in this country. At the end of the day, he says the basic power relations haven't changed, but that doesn't mean that dreams aren't still worth dreaming. So, you know, I think one of the first steps in thinking about possible futures is just opening up our imagination. So in this game, the aim is to tell stories that are both plausible and imaginative, to rethink the field of historical possibility by, you know, exploring things that might on their surface be slightly unrealistic. So I think in doing that imaginative work, you know, we open ourselves up to these possible futures.
And there was one other question from one of the students which talked about some of the assumptions and values laden within the missions themselves. So I'll read out her comment, which was Suzanne Polsky. Again, apologies if I'm saying your last name wrong. So she says, for me, what is interesting is the assumptions and values laden within the missions themselves. For example, your Round 2 mission, invent a plausible new technology that transforms the relationship between two species, improving the well-being of each. This mission implies that new human technology is needed to redress the environmental balance between two species, presumably non-human. What do we assume we need to intervene upon? Why assume we need to intervene upon such relationships and fix them? And by what definition of well-being do our actions conform to? And are they the same for both?
Yeah, I think what you see in this game is a lot of different competing norms and values embedded in the mission. So some are deliberately nefarious, like corrupt a nation's government, you know. Others are about fomenting revolution with unexpected allies. So you know, I think it's in part about questioning the norms and values. Like that's kind of the whole point of the game is thinking about critically, like these values that inhabit us, and how is it that these values come to inhabit us? The conclusion of my first book is kind of wacky. It's about West Papua, and it's about playing the game of global futures, but inventing a new mission. So riffing off this Caribbean theorist who describes this tube that sucks resources from one part of the world and deposits them in another. He was writing about the Caribbean and what he called this medieval vacuum cleaner that took resources out of these plantation economies and brought them back to Seville, Spain. So in the 21st century, in the West Papua context, I describe a tube, in some cases a literal pipeline, taking gold from the land and natural gas, a project done by BP, and sort of describe how this architecture of resource extraction has been scaled up to embrace and endanger the entire planet. And in inviting people to play the game of global futures in this concluding gambit of the book, I basically say that a new mission might be take over the tube. So, you know, imagine a way that you can sort of infiltrate your local utilities board or your government and influence the ways that the economy of resource extraction, like the political economy of resource extraction, is one of the fundamental problems of our age. So how do we readdress that? You know, there's political mechanisms, and then there's other mechanisms that are more imaginative. So I think, you know, the game is all about questioning the values and assumptions embedded in these missions, but I think there's sort of a looseness and openness that lets you come up with your own missions and your own purposes. Are there other questions, Susie?
Those were the main questions, actually. I think so. Yeah.
And I think just in closing, I'll say, you know, there's lots of different ways to upload videos. You could do it from your smartphone. You don't have to point it at yourself. A lot of the more imaginative videos that we're starting to see posted on the Facebook page involve people's bedrooms, stuffed animals, books, little cutout images. So you can, you know, working with these democratically available technologies now, we all have new possibilities for storytelling. So I just invite you all to use those technologies that you have, whether it's a cell phone or a tablet or a computer, tell these stories, and we can share and continue to share and build upon each other's imagination in this virtual space. So thanks everybody for joining us, and if you have any other questions, those of you on the Future Learn site, you can channel those to Susie and myself, and we're going to be checking those comments. So thanks for participating, everybody, and yeah, happy, what day is today? Tuesday? Wednesday? Happy Wednesday.
Wednesday.